Through the morning mist, a dark shape struggled against the gentle surf. At first, Mike thought it might be debris from one of the commercial vessels that frequented these waters. But then he heard it, a sound that would haunt him for months to come. A weak, desperate cry carried across the water, barely audible over the lapping waves and crying gulls. "Dear God," Mike whispered, his calloused hands gripping the wheel as he carefully maneuvered his boat closer. The shape resolved, itself into something that made his heart sink. A penguin. Its normally sleek form now matted and heavy with thick black oil. The bird's natural tuxedo-like coloring was almost completely obscured by the toxic substance that seemed to be slowly suffocating it. With trembling fingers, Mike reached for his satellite phone. The device had seen better days, much like everything else on his modest fishing vessel, but it had never felt more important than at this moment. He punched in the number for the Coastal Wildlife Rescue Center, which he'd saved years ago after helping with a stranded seal. The waiting tone seemed to stretch for an eternity. "Coastal Wildlife Rescue, this is Jennifer speaking. How can I help you?" Mike's voice cracked as he described the scene before him. "I'm about 3 miles off Harrison's Point. There's a penguin here covered in oil. Never seen anything like it. The poor thing can barely move." Jennifer's professional demeanor couldn't completely mask her concern. "Can you stay with it? We'll dispatch our rapid response team immediately. Try to keep visual contact, but don't attempt to approach. The oil could be toxic." The next 47 minutes were among the longest of Mike's life. He watched helplessly as the penguin struggled to stay afloat, its movements becoming increasingly labored. The morning sun had fully risen now, revealing the true extent of the contamination. The oil wasn't just on the penguin, it formed rainbow-colored patches across the water's surface, spreading like dark fingers across the ocean. The rescue team arrived in a sleek response vessel, its blue emergency lights reflecting off the oil-slicked water. 4 people in protective gear worked with practiced efficiency, carefully approaching the distressed bird. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead veterinarian, directed the operation with calm authority. "Easy now," she called to her team. "Remember, it's scared and in pain. Move slowly." Mike watched as they used specialized equipment to contain and lift the penguin from the water. The bird barely struggled, a worrying sign. As they placed it in a specialized transport container, Mike could see its chest heaving with each labored breath. "What are its chances?" he asked Dr. Chen, as she made some quick notes on a waterproof tablet. She looked up, her eyes serious, behind her protective goggles. "Every minute counts with oil contamination. The fact that you found it so quickly gives it a fighting chance. We're taking it to our main facility in Boston. They have specialized equipment for treating marine oil contamination." As the rescue boat prepared to depart, Dr. Chen turned to Mike one last time. "You've done a good thing today, Mr. Sullivan. We'll need your statement later about the conditions you observed. This kind of spill shouldn't be happening in these waters." Mike nodded, his throat tight. As he watched the rescue vessel speed away, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. More dark shapes were moving in the water, but these weren't alive. Dead fish were starting to surface, their silver bodies painted black by the same substance that had nearly claimed the penguin. He reached for his phone again. This was going to be a long day, and somewhere out there, something or someone was responsible for this devastation. The story was just beginning. The Coastal Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in Boston was already bustling with activity when the rescue team arrived. Word had spread quickly about the oil-contaminated penguin, and specialists from various departments had assembled to assist. The facility's emergency treatment room, typically reserved for the most critical cases, had been prepared with warming equipment, monitoring devices, and specialized cleaning solutions. Dr. Lauren Martinez, the center's chief toxicologist, was waiting at the entrance. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her expression was one of focused determination as the team rushed past with their precious cargo. The Penguin's condition had deteriorated during the transport, its breathing becoming more labored with each passing minute. "Treatment Room 1, Dr. Martinez directed, her voice carrying the weight of 15 years of experience with marine wildlife emergencies. "Initial assessment suggests we're dealing with crude oil contamination. We need to start the cleaning process immediately, but first we have to stabilize its core temperature and breathing." The next 3 hours became a carefully choreographed dance of medical intervention and specialized care. The team worked, methodically, their movements precise despite the urgency of the situation. They named the Penguin Hope, a tradition at the Center for Critical Cases, and a reminder of what they were fighting for. Dr. Martinez's hands moved with practiced precision as she carefully began the delicate process of removing the toxic oil from Hope's feathers. The Penguin's eyes, though dulled by exhaustion, remained alert, watching every movement of the medical team. The pungent smell of crude oil filled the treatment room, a stark reminder of humanity's impact on marine life. "Blood oxygen levels are stabilizing," announced Jake Thompson, the senior veterinary technician, his voice carrying a note of cautious optimism. The monitoring equipment beeped steadily in the background, its rhythm becoming a reassuring soundtrack to their life-saving efforts. The cleaning process was painstaking and methodically slow. Each feather needed individual attention, and rushing could cause more harm than good. They used a specialized solution that would break down the oil without damaging Hope's natural waterproofing, a crucial factor for any seabird's survival. "Look at this," Dr. Martinez called out, holding up a small sample of the removed oil. "This isn't just any crude oil. The consistency and color suggest it's from a deep-sea drilling operation." She carefully placed the sample in a sterile container for later analysis. "We need to alert the Environmental Protection Agency. This could be evidence of illegal dumping." As the hours wore on, more of Hope's natural black and white plumage began to emerge from beneath the toxic coating. The team worked in shifts, each person playing their part in this delicate rescue operation. Through the treatment room's window, they could see the sun setting over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in ironically beautiful shades of oil spill black and orange. Meanwhile, in another part of the facility, Dr. Sarah Chen was on a video call with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. The oil spill that had nearly claimed Hope's life was proving to be part of a much larger environmental crisis. "We're tracking a significant slick moving south along the coast," explained Commander David Roberts of the NOAA response team, his face serious on the video screen. "Initial satellite imagery suggests it could be from an unreported tanker leak. We're mobilizing containment teams, but the damage to marine life could be extensive." The news hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of Mike Sullivan, the fisherman who had found Hope, and all the other fishermen whose livelihoods depended on healthy oceans. She thought of the countless other marine animals that might not be as fortunate as Hope to be found in time. Back in the treatment room, Hope was showing the first signs of improvement. The Penguin's breathing had become more regular, and blood tests showed decreasing levels of toxicity. Dr. Martinez allowed herself a small smile as she watched the bird attempt to preen its newly cleaned feathers, a natural behavior that was an encouraging sign of recovery. "We need to start tube feeding," she instructed her team. "Small amounts of liquid nutrients every 2 hours. We can't risk dehydration or malnutrition complicating the recovery process." As night fell over Boston, the rehabilitation center remained a hub of activity. News vans had begun gathering outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. The story of Hope's rescue had caught the media's attention, becoming a symbol of both environmental devastation and human compassion. In her office, Dr. Martinez was reviewing the preliminary analysis of the oil samples when her phone buzzed. It was a text from Mike Sullivan. "Any news about our friend?" She typed back quickly, "Fighting hard. Not out of the woods, but showing promise. Thank you again for finding her in time. The next 72 hours would be critical. Hopes. Body had to process and eliminate the toxins absorbed through skin contact with the oil. The team set up a rotation schedule, ensuring someone would be monitoring the penguin's condition around the clock. As Dr. Martinez prepared to hand over supervision to the night shift team, she paused by Hope's enclosure. The penguin had finally fallen into what appeared to be restful sleep, its chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Looking at this small creature fighting so hard to survive, Dr. Martinez felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had treated countless animals over her career, but there was something special about Hope. Perhaps it was the timing, coming at a moment when environmental consciousness was at a crucial tipping point. Or perhaps it was the way this single penguin had already brought together so many people in the cause of conservation. The dawn of the third day brought cautious optimism to the rehabilitation center. Hope had made it through the critical first 48 hours, and blood tests showed significant improvement in all major indicators. The penguin was now active enough to require a larger enclosure, complete with a small pool of temperature-controlled water. Dr. Chen arrived early that morning to find a small group of elementary school students pressed against the observation window, their breath fogging the glass as they watched Hope explore the new environment. Their teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, was using the moment as an impromptu lesson about marine conservation. "Can anyone tell me why it's so important to keep our oceans clean?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked her students. A little girl with braids raised her hand eagerly. "Because the animals need it to be their home, and we need it too for food and oxygen and stuff." Dr. Chen smiled as she passed by. These children represented the future, the generation that would hopefully learn from current environmental mistakes and work to prevent them from recurring. In her office, she found a thick folder of documents waiting on her desk. The EPA had been busy, and their preliminary investigation into the source of the oil spill was yielding disturbing results. The oil matched the type used by a particular shipping company with a history of environmental violations. She was deep in the reports when a commotion from the treatment area caught her attention. Running down the corridor, she found Dr. Martinez and her team gathered around Hope's enclosure, their faces lit with excitement. "Watch this," Dr. Martinez whispered, pointing to the pool. Hope was in the water, diving and surfacing with increasing confidence. The penguin's movements, though still not as smooth as they would be in the wild, showed remarkable improvement from the nearly lifeless creature they had rescued just days ago. "The waterproofing of the feathers is holding," Jake observed, making notes on his tablet. "Natural oils are redistributing properly. This is exactly what we wanted to see." But their celebration was interrupted by the arrival of Thomas Drake, the center's legal counsel. His expression was grave as he gestured for Dr. Chen to join him in the hallway. "The shipping company is denying responsibility," he said without preamble. "They're claiming the oil must have come from another source. We're going to need more evidence to make the case stick." Dr. Chen felt her jaw tighten. "We have the chemical analysis, the satellite imagery." "They have a team of lawyers arguing that the evidence is circumstantial," Thomas cut in. "They're preparing to fight this in court, and they have deep pockets." The conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Maybe I can help with that." Mike Sullivan stood in the hallway, his weathered face determined. "I took videos that morning before I called you. Been doing it for months, actually, documenting unusual activity in the shipping lanes. Never thought I'd need it, but